Before I start, just a warning. This game includes heavy topics like child abuse and implications of CSA. We've all played games with stories that we could relate to. Some stick with us more than the others because it resonates with our past experiences or even our current ones. Games with protagonists dealing with the same stuff we do. Maybe not literally like fighting monsters, but just the narrative of it. Today, I want to talk about a game that has stuck with me. Admittedly, it's just been released recently. This game is a stylish survival action horror game with major punk rock vibes. Here we follow the story of a girl named Polly, a fugitive on the run, only to end up in a bizarre world where she was tasked to face demons, help a whole ass rebellion from a fog that was slowly consuming that world, and most importantly, face her past and the sin that weighs her down throughout the story. But behind all this fun design, banger soundtrack, and rage-inducing bosses, lies a tragic story of how a person deals with their guilt. Do we really learn how to forgive ourselves? Or do we just punish ourselves as time goes by, accepting that our past mistakes makes us monsters, makes us who we are, makes us beasts? Hello everyone, I'm Oboro and welcome to Silly Polly Beast. The Abyss. It's this funky yet treacherous world where faceless creatures, both friendly and hostile, inhabit. Judging from some areas of the game, it's almost as if the Abyss is a reflection of the city Polly has lived in her whole life. The reason we're here in the first place was because of a lighter that was stolen from us by a weird-looking dog, who then delivered it to its master for us to meet. The so-called Tormented One, who was bound by chains, wanted to make a pact with Polly. He'll help us escape the Abyss, but we need to help him be freed from the chains by killing the demons who sealed him up. With no other leads, of course, anyone would agree with a proposition like that. For now at least. Also, he gave us a revolver. I don't think anyone can convince me not to work with him otherwise. The further we progress with Polly's journey in the Abyss, we slowly realize that this world was created from Polly's guilt and trauma. And now she has to face it in order for her to go back to the real world. Some sort of inner journey or self-reflection. The Embers, the main enemies Polly will face, are the very reminder of her sins. It'll make much more sense later on as to why they're represented as remnants of burnt bodies, so watch out for that. Very early in the game, we face a drunk man as the first mini-boss. This man is the very same man who we met in the surface that tried to get handsy with us. But fortunately, he met an unfortunate end, minutes before we descended into this place. After executing him point blank with our revolver, we uttered the words, "He deserved it," followed by, "They all deserve it," meaning that Polly might have done something similar before these events, and now she's trying to justify her actions. Polly could have just slapped the man, but she chose to execute him, because fair enough, he did try to kill us first. The way I interpreted the interaction between Polly and the drunk man is that Polly probably felt guilty about how the man died in the real world. It's almost as if she was thinking that if the man didn't meet Polly, didn't meet her, the events leading to his death wouldn't have happened. But in the end, she felt as if his death was deserving. This was her first step of accepting the beast inside of her. Even though Polly wasn't the exact cause of his death, she still blames herself for it. Hence, she tried to justify it by saying that he did in fact deserve it. Which he did, by the way. I'm saying that as me. Also, that's probably another reason why the drunk man appeared in this world in the first place. Because like I said, the Abyss is a reminder of Polly's guilt. And about the ominous line, "They all deserve it," I'm gonna blue ball you a bit because that's for later. Mowing the embers down along the way, not everyone we meet here is an enemy. Helping out the dying shadow by dragging his already mangled body across a railway, Polly meets a group of rebels who claim to be fighting the fog. They ask for our help by making us run errands like all games do, and coincidentally, our first demon target was already in that vicinity. It was better for us to cooperate than have them hinder our plans. The rebel group for me, in a way, represents hope, here in the world made from Polly's perspective. They are Polly's determination in confronting her past, the will to fight this oppressive fog, or they're just there because a hub makes sense in this game. But I'm delusional, so I'll stick with my beliefs. Also, this is my video, so suck it. Aside from the rebel group, we also meet some friendly faces. Two imp boys named Kai and Kato, who resemble the boys whom we got our skateboard from back in the surface. They also helped us here in the abyss by tossing a shotgun to us, adding another weapon to our arsenal. We also learned later on that they were actually helping the fog smuggle weapons, and because of this they got in the crossfire between the rebels and the fog, while we were on a mission to guide the rebels on where to rain hellfire. So yeah, we basically got Kai mutilated and had to bring him back to their father, where Kai told us that their father made them help the fog. This adds another layer to Polly's guilt. Even if she didn't directly cause harm to Kai and Kato, it's natural that she'd feel like she was at fault for it, when she clearly didn't know that the brothers were in cahoots with the fog. Similar to the events with the drunk man from before, Polly had no control over these circumstances. But you can argue that it was her choice to help the rebels, but at the same time, helping them was our only lead to getting back to the surface. Which now leads us to the demons we're trying to eliminate. The first demon was in the form of a centipede, and to challenge it, we needed to ring a bell. The fight was pretty easy. The only problem I had was managing resources while it summoned the embers to hurl at me endlessly. After beating it, the tormented one suddenly made us bathe in the demon's blood, granting us powers and a pair of horns, making us feel like we belong here in the abyss. The second demon was a mosquito that was being raised by the father of the imp siblings so he could use it to cure his legs. Apparently in this world, consuming anything demonic would work miracles on someone, like how eating a demon larva made Kai regrow his leg back. Unlike the first demon, resource was not that much of a problem here. It's more of a gimmick fight where I needed to do something other than damaging the boss in order to beat it. Otherwise, it'll just endlessly regenerate. Beating the mosquito demon granted us more power, and now a tail to complete our look. Here's where Polly realized that she was being tricked by the tormented one, because if the demon was locked up in the imp's family's basement since its birth, how could it have chained him up in the first place? Okay, so I've been mentioning about Polly's guilt since the beginning of this video, but what exactly was she guilty of? What was she running away from? In the beginning of the game, we overhear a TV from a room that a kid has committed arson on an orphanage, and the description of said kid matched Polly quite a bit. Also the fact that she was trying to hide her face from the cops too. And every now and then, we get glimpses of Polly's past before she got here in the abyss, before she was on the run. Polly lived in an orphanage along with her sister Alice, although they never really specified whether they were blood-related or not. But I imagine that in that environment, it didn't really matter because they pretty much went through life together, through thick and thin, and what they had to go through in that orphanage, it was all thick and viscous and heavy. The kids in the orphanage, including the sisters, were being mistreated and abused by the caregiver, Mrs. Valentina Smith. Polly and Alice had planned to escape together with the other kids and then burning the orphanage down, along with the adults in it, foreshadowing as to why the enemies are called embers. Obviously, Polly managed to escape, but we never really know the fate of Alice and the other kids. Of all places, we find the answer to that question here in the abyss. Polly is forced to confront her past, to relive everything she had gone through. The version of the orphanage here in the abyss was already in a rough state. Corridors were blocked up by debris, and the hallways were filled with throbbing guts. Navigating through these wretched halls, Polly recollects her time back in the orphanage. Before all of this, she remembers the clicking of Mrs. Valentina's heels as she walked, bringing terror to the kids, worrying if they'll be punished for something trivial again. She recalls the guests of the orphanage, wealthy people who donates for their cause, but demands playtime with the resident children. Seeing the clinic again reminded her of the rumors about the doctor. Seriously ill patients would suddenly disappear, and the rest of the kids were told that they got adopted. Rumors are, they were sedated and sent to the basement for their organs to be harvested. Mrs. Valentina also partook in the carnal abuse of the children, and Polly witnessed it happening herself. This memory was probably the most haunting one, telling the child to be quiet and to lay down still, with her humming an ironic and soothing tone. But she had an accomplice in all of this. Margot, also a resident of the orphanage, would always rat out Polly and her refusal to entertain the special guests, and of course, that leads to Valentina punishing Polly. But with all the atrocities that's happening, the director of the orphanage won't do anything about it. That's why I consider him to be an accessory to all these heinous crimes, even if he was afraid of Valentina. Here in the Abyss version of the orphanage, we still managed to come across both Valentina and Margot. Although they looked a lot different, Valentina almost resembled the Embers, having a body so deformed it was unrecognizable except for the distinct sound of her heels. Margot, on the other hand, was a giant, overlooking outside the orphanage, trying to see whatever Polly was up to. She was burnt and mutilated as well. Here's where Polly had to face reality and remember the tragedy that befell Alice and the kids. They had planned to escape the orphanage to a parking lot that leads to the shore at night. Everything was already set in motion. Polly had provided the distraction for Valentina by sacrificing herself to get punished so that Alice and the other kids could sneak into the basement that's going to the parking lot, then proceeding to the boiler room for Polly to light up the boiler, leaving the lid open and letting the fire spread via the coal nearby. But they overlooked one thing in all of this. The parking lot was locked until the morning during that night. This dreadful realization dawned on Polly, and now she's blaming herself for it, being as the only survivor and the one who lit up the boiler. Also, if you're wondering how Polly survived, it's because of a tiny oopsie. The hatch lid in the boiler room closed, so she had to exit through the main entrance, since the building was already engulfed in flames. So no conspiracy that Polly knew about the locked parking lot all along, and that she wanted to free Alice and the kids by burning them alive. None of that shit. She's not that sick. The last thing Polly needed to do inside the orphanage was to turn on the boiler again. But this time, we're making sure Valentina goes down. As she approaches us, thinking that we're cornered, Polly turned the valve, and the explosion directly hit Valentina, burning her once again. Okay, I did not realize I could kick her dead body during this playthrough because I was so shocked about what happened to Alice and the kids before. After reliving the horrors that had happened in the orphanage, we take in the scenery of this beautiful yet haunting world that is made from Polly's own guilt. And now, it was time to face Margot. It was time to move forward and take the first step to forgiving ourselves. This fight was fairly annoying, and I had to retry it several times, not because of the lack of resources, but because of the stage itself. Margot only had 2 attacks, a biting attack and one where she vomits on us. When Margot chomps down on us, she also takes out pieces of the roof itself, leaving a hole on the ground. Now, the more she does this, the less space you can run to, and more holes you can fall into. This is annoying, but if you get her to just bite down on one spot, then this removes the lack of space to run to problem. This is probably the stage that I like the best because it tied into what we just did before getting here. The more we progress on Margot's HP, the more the orphanage will become engulfed in flames, and it's more terrifying to fall into those holes. But ultimately, after several tries, we managed to beat Margot. But with her dying breath, she still manages to torment us, telling us that we are the devil, a beast. Okay, so first, let's go back to the demons that the tormented one wanted us to kill. To me, defeating these demons meant that we were giving in to the idea that all we're capable of is destroying things. The more chains we unseal from the tormented, the more we accept the fact that we're actually the monster, hence the transformation into an imp, and that we belong here in this world. Speaking of unsealing those chains, I kind of interpreted it as a liberation for Polly. She's freeing herself from the guilt in a self-destructive way by just accepting that everything was her fault and blaming herself for it. Okay, now let's talk about the tormented one. I know this is a reach, but I feel like the tormented one is how Polly sees herself. Because deep down inside her, she knew all along that Alice and the kids were already gone, and she has to just embrace the so-called beast that she has become. She's being tormented by that guilt, get it? It made no sense why the Tormented One wanted to kill the demons because at one point he told Polly that the fog will help her. But remember, the demons were using the embers as their minion during those boss fights, and those embers are the reason why the fog is spreading. So to me, it seemed like it was Polly trying to double down on her feelings towards herself. Like what I said before, that all she knows was to destroy everything around her. Like the drunk man, Kai and Kato, and that in a self-destructive way she was freeing herself, the unsealing of the chains of the Tormented One. So, after beating the two demons, the game conveniently makes us go back to the orphanage. This was also after the fact that we realized that we were being tricked by the Tormented One. Okay, I keep on adding one. I know it's just the Tormented, but it sounds so much better with it. So yeah, this was basically the turning point for Polly, where she slowly realizes the fact that some things are just not in her control. Knowing this, Polly can finally confront her past, and she did. Now, the orphanage. To me, the fog throughout the game may represent the oppression and suffocating feeling that the orphanage induces to the children living there. Because here in the Abyss, the fog limits our movement in the world, and it would hurt Polly when we try to traverse it. Much like how certain places in the orphanage were prohibited, they get punished if they do disobey. Also, the fog were a cluster of hands trying to get to Polly, and if you remember the guests of the orphanage, only bad things can happen once those hands reaches her. Another thing I noticed are the Matryoshka dolls. I think these represented the kids who were in need of help hiding from Valentina, and Polly placed them in the storage room. But every time we come back, they get broken aside from the biggest one. It's because it was the snitch, and we had to fight it as a mini-boss at one point. This is also a reach from me, but Margot was probably the rat, because Polly mentioned that the orphanage was not like this before Valentina came in, so I think Margot is also not like this before. She probably knew about that hiding place because if we look at Margot's appearance, she also had some scars, so I assume she also got hurt by Valentina. And her way of surviving is by getting on Valentina's good side by sacrificing the other kids, which is kind of fucked up in the end. With Polly's story about to reach its conclusion, the game is really letting us take in how beautiful they made this world. During the boat ride, the final demon had appeared in front of us, but it was not aggressive nor was it trying to harm us. Note that Polly's reaction is, he's not afraid of me. Poor Polly, she really accepted the fact that even demons should be afraid of her. Trying to touch the demon, the Tormented's voice rings in our heads again, reminding Polly about their agreement and telling her to kill the last demon. Also, he said something odd here. The rescuers aren't pulling your scraps out of the stinking sewer you so carelessly fell into. Without me, it would just be the remains of a young criminal who burned down the place that took her in. Does this mean that we're already dead and that the Abyss is just a limbo or purgatory? We really have no way to find out except by going forward. Reaching the shore, it was the Camp Energetic, the camp that the orphanage kids used to go to. In here, we set up the last ritual. Not to kill the demon, but to sacrifice something for it. The ritual required a demon egg and a horn of an imp that was willing to give up their horn, so cutting off a dead one's imp horn was no good. Conveniently, when we were about to saw off our remaining horn, because I tripped on Valentina's trap earlier and she cut one of our horns off, Kai and Kato suddenly appeared. Kai offered his own horn instead, so I took that offer. Listen, when a man offers to be heroic, you never decline that, because that would mean you're setting aside their resolve. Also, if you remove your horns, Polly becomes weaker and I don't really want to struggle with the final boss. With everything in hand, we've performed the ritual, and out comes a demon larva. Feeding it to the last demon, a familiar face burst out from the demon's body. It was Alice. But before we could even talk to her, the Tormented's dog came swooping in, killing the demon. This was the cue for the final boss fight, except it wasn't. It was more like a series of boss fights. First was just a reenacting of Old Yeller. Second was probably the most annoying part of the game, where Valentina comes back to life and then chases us in this narrow hallway, while we're trying to break obstacles and open up gates. This was already patched, but when I played this game, the solution was to just walk and keep a close distance to her, because the moment we get too far, she rushes us like a dog in heat. And now, the final battle against the Tormented himself. This was just RNG with the drops the mobs give you. You either get recovery items or bullets for your secondary weapon, which would make the fight faster. The shield formation here actually reminded me of Signalis' boss fight with Falca, so it made me smile seeing this. Finally, beating the Tormented King, he revealed that he was actually planning to make us his offering for the Abyss, but instead, we became the perfect candidate to rule this world, leaving us with the final gift. The Tormented King was no more. With the eye that he left us with, we can now see passages between worlds, meaning we can finally go back to our own world. But we were also left with two choices. We would either save the Abyss and become its new ruler, or let this world collapse and go back to our own world. We picked the most obvious route. There was no reason for us to stay here. Let this world made from our own guilt collapse. We're finally ready to move on and forgive ourselves. Okay, so that was quite a ride, but I want to discuss some final things here. First off, why did the Tormented King imply that Polly was dead? Thinking about this now, along with the ending, just made no sense. Are we already dead and this ending that we get to go back to the real world was just bullshit? Or was the Tormented King just messing with us again? I'd like to assume that it was the latter because he already tricked us once. Now, let's talk about the endings because there are 4 endings here. The first one, the one we did, leaving the Abyss. In this ending, Polly returns to the surface with a newfound hope, and now she's strong enough to look forward to her new life. If we still have any semblance of the imp powers, Polly keeps the lighter and Alice appears at the ending shot. I think in this case, the reason we kept the lighter and Alice appearing at the end was because we still have that lingering feeling that we're to blame, a reminder of the things that we have done. We may have forgiven ourselves, but we will never forget. The other variation for the leave ending is removing all their imp powers. In that ending, which I don't have footage of, Polly throws away the lighter and Alice appeared initially in the bus but disappears in the ending shot. To me, this is Polly completely moving on from the events that had happened, because if we recall in the beginning, she promised Alice to return the lighter, but now that she has accepted that Alice is gone, there was no more reason for her to keep it. Now, for the stay ending, Polly decides to rule over the Abyss and the Embers. To me, this was Polly accepting the beast inside of her, that she was no longer fit to go back to the real world. If we choose to remove any imp parts we had, Polly shoots another Polly that was in front of the crowd of Embers. I think it's because we couldn't fully accept that we're just monsters, and I think we're still quite conflicted if we should have stayed here or not. But if we choose not to get rid of our imp parts, we don't shoot the other Polly, meaning that we really accepted that we're the beast in this story. Okay, so this game really spoke to me because of how it handled the way someone who felt like they were to blame for something. First up, in the beginning part here in the Abyss, there were several eyes that looked at Polly. When you're guilty of something or when you're feeling guilty of something, it feels like everyone is watching your every move and you think that they all know what you did. It's really an uncomfortable feeling. Another way they handled Polly's trauma was repressing the memories of the events at the orphanage. Without trauma dumping in this video, I do want to say yes, selective amnesia is real. Another thing I liked was the endings and how delusional I am to thinking that keeping the imp powers and the lighter meant that we would still remind ourselves that we were to blame. And until this day, we were still to punish ourselves with the memories of it. Another way the game presented that guilt is when Polly associates herself with everything bad that's happening around her. I would even go as far as to say that she blames her existence for the unfortunate events she has seen so far. Even if she had nothing to do with the drunk man's death, he still appeared in the abyss as if to remind Polly of what happened, and she was the reason he was there. Kai and Kato, who we also saw before we got in the abyss, also somehow ended up there. The last time she saw them in the surface was them getting chased by the cops. So I think them being here also made sense, because Polly thought that if it weren't for her, those two wouldn't have been chased by those cops. So again, she feels guilty for it. Even if Polly literally did nothing, she can't help but think she's at fault, because knowing that she indirectly caused the death of her most beloved sister, that would traumatize a kid her age and affect everything she perceives around her in the future. It's almost as if her brain is now rewired to think that everything bad will be her fault, or she has something to do with the things that are happening around her. I mean, the bad things that are happening around her. So yeah, without revealing too much about myself, I felt like this game's story was relatable for someone who blames himself for events that was never really in his control, and to this day is punishing himself for it. No, I did not burn an orphanage down, shut the fuck up. So yeah, that was Silly Polly Beast, a game that has made me feel that I'm not alone and made me realize that other people do have this gut-wrenching feeling too. Again, this was Obara. Thank you for watching and I'll see you soon. Goodbye.